I'm absolutely fine, gentle sir. How are you? I do. I do. I do. Feeling it. Uh, I got a fun story for you. Hey, did you know that if you get like even like a little bit of apple cider vinegar on your phone, it will die? Well, that's just a hot tip for you. Some lessons were learned this weekend, phone based. And I had like one of those really good phones that had been going for like 5.5 years. And, so I was very emotionally attached to Old Yeller. And like, I don't like having new gadgets. It's like, no, that's not my thing. But I had this like little bottle of apple cider vinegar in my bag and some of it spilled. And like, it wasn't like a puddle or anything, but there was just like some residual in my bag. And I put my phone in there and it was like, I'm dead now. And then the worst bit is like, so what has happened is the third bottom of the screen is dead and unresponsive. So I can't enter my PIN to get into the phone, which is what you need to do when you get a new device to just like sync it all over. So I'm currently in Google jail for 24 hours while they make sure I'm not like...
So you don't have a phone?
No, I haven't had one since Friday. It's been...
Oh, no.
You know what? I have been having to fucking live, laugh, love in the moment. There's been like not a screen in sight. It's been fucked up, dude. Like, yeah. Tell you what, it's all fun and games till you get on the train. Just raw dogging it out here. Train back from Cambridge yesterday. There's like 2 people sitting directly next to me who are like, this is the time to catch up on phone calls to loved ones for an hour. And I've got nothing. I'm just sitting there. No, man. No. Anyway, this is like a warning. People need to know about vinegar-based issues. That's all. That's all.
Thank you.
I got your best interests at heart.
I'll be sure to remember that the next time I have apple cider vinegar.
Yeah. Do. Brah. This is relatable content. Okay, I'm a relatable queen. So
I never said it wasn't. There's no reason, you're getting defensive, and I'm just here to
affirm,
to celebrate your success, your scientific finding. Really, you're an alchemist.
So true.
Of sorts.
So true. Yeah, exactly. I'm doing whack ass chemistry. That's for sure. I'll tell you that much.
You're just going to boil a bunch of piss and apple cider vinegar together and see what the fuck happens.
Throw your phone in there. Why not? Let it loose.
Oh, man.
Oh.
Witch potions are different than I was led to believe.
I know, right? I know. This is we're updating it for the 21st century. You've got to scale back your ambitions.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, who has Eye of Newt these days?
Oh, do you know what Eye of Newt is? It's mustard seed.
No.
It's mustard seed.
Come on.
I'm serious.
Boo.
I know. But also, it makes a little more sense. But
I mean, yeah, but I never thought about it in the context of it being like a real thing. Like, it was always just like, something witches do. And, they grab eyes when they do it. And they throw eyes in a big pot and they stir it. As really happened a few hundred years ago. Witches flying. They had brooms.
They were all green.
A lot of them in New England.
Yeah.
A lot of them were in New England for some reason. Who's to say why?
It's a proud American tradition, being kind of spooky. In many ways, New England invented the goth girl. So, people think it's English, but it's like it went the other way. It's one of those,
Where is Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley from?
Okay, fair play. All right, so that's British.
Oh, is she? I don't remember.
Yeah, but
I was never a teenage girl or on Tumblr, so I do not know Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's entire biography front to back. Go ahead.
Well, my point is, she's after the witch trials, so she's just like improving on a theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All respect to her. She's
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the sci-fi / fantasy genres. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, Mary. Cheers.
Thank you for fucking your husband on your mom's grave. That's a
wow.
That's a good story for everyone.
And we all like it, and I like that. Not only did she do it, but she was like, "Bitches gotta know." Right. The thing about me is, and I'm like, okay, all right, get spooky with it.
You ever wonder, Percy Bysshe Shelley was obviously into her, but you ever wonder, if he was just like, man, this thing with her, she has with her mom's real fucked up.
You gotta
just halfway through, pumping on top of her mom's grave, he's like, God, this is so weird. You just I
mean, the post nut clarity on that one is going to be real.
Oh man,
I'm just saying.
He's just like, my God, what have I done?
Oh, we've all been there, bro. I mean, no, we have not. We have not.
No?
Just to be clear.
No, but good for her.
Yeah, one of the spookiest to ever do it, right? Why not? Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. Oh man.
Oh. Well, I don't know. Do you want to talk about Normans or what? Should we do this?
Could we get a Norman invasion of America?
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It wouldn't really help. God, I can't even imagine the logistics of effectively invading America. But man,
they're going to bring their very fine dairy products over, and I don't know. The French figured out how to get the left to win an election against fascists. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't actually have a left party here. We just have the center right and the right fighting to determine which of them gets to blame the left the most after the fact. So yeah, I would not looking good here, folks. Not looking good for the status quo anyway.
I'll say
Biden ain't got a chance in hell, and
Well, once again, someone online said this, and they're right. Is that the left's biggest sin is that we're right too early.
Yes,
and that's why everyone's mad at us. And it's like everybody knew this man had a pudding brain.
Yeah,
but you weren't supposed to notice that.
Yeah,
and it's also I've been really interested in watching the reaction to it because during the debate and after, everyone was like, fuck, what the fuck, dude? Oh my God, this man's brain is pudding. What is going to happen now? And then a week later, everyone's like, nah, shut up. That's fine, actually. Actually, I think it's okay. Actually, I like it when my president is visibly sundowning. I think it's good. And you're like, what the fuck, man?
It's a surreal... It's it's surreal because it's one of these things I said he was too old when he ran in 2020. Mm-hmm. He was too old.
That's why he said he was only going to do one
Bernie
term.
was too old. Bernie was the best option there was. He was too old. Trump is too old. They should cut it off. You cannot be a politician after you're 62 or whatever. Something like that. I don't know what
there should be a mandatory retirement age. Mandatory retirement.
I'm holding up the list of studies that show the rate of cognitive decline increases drastically after the age of 62. Anyway,
I'm saying what we need to do is we need to bring back, obviously, as a part of this, a really good state pension that everybody gets immediately at 62, but also and also goodbye.
Yes.
Go.
Yes, you don't need to be in the workforce. You need to be doing stuff with other old people or hanging out with your kids or grandkids or something like that.
Get a hobby.
Or reading books on a veranda and drinking tea or something like that is how you should live out your old years without having to worry about this shit. Without having, I still want to work. Cool, we've got gardens to hang. Yeah. There's gardens and,
you can volunteer down at the library.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever. Just dude, you shouldn't. No.
No.
It's so it's not ageist. I want old people to have dignity and retire with dignity. This old person specifically, I have many other problems with, but like, yeah, and it's just like
it's also undignified.
Oh God, living here right now is like, it's like constantly being like, constantly being assailed by like 10 contradictory opinions all at once from like people who are like, you guys are vote blue no matter who, whatever. And you're like, oh, like, it's like Biden needs to step aside. Okay, yeah, he does. He's too old. It's like very clear. I'll be honest, I think he should step down now generally because I think it's a danger to public health for someone that old and who is obviously sundowning and having these problems at any point in the day. I don't care what point in the day it is. He's having them. Should not have his hand on 3,700 nukes. Neither should Donald Trump. I'll say that. I really don't care. I don't want to hear, oh, you don't complain about Trump. Yes, I do. I've said he sucks. We all know he sucks. We're not talking about that.
Yeah, like, no.
Biden, I now don't think really, unless, like, I don't, short of some, like, insane scandal that, like, I can't even fathom, I don't see how he wins at all. However, he is staying in the race because he and his wife, his son, and his little group around him are all just insane narcissists, and they are like gung-ho about this. And if you are serious when you say, as Democrats do, that democracy's on the line,
well then,
future of the country's on the line, okay, cool, then you need to run someone who can actually win and not
like, it doesn't seem
sundowning, and you're just like, yeah, keep going, pop, like, no.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to me like they care very much, right? Like, they don't seem to care that bloody much that democracy is on the line, that, like, they won't go get, like, a good candidate. So...
Yeah, and I mean, and the only candidate I think now, the only candidate I believe the American electoral process and the DNC as they're constructed right now could feasibly handle is Kamala, who I don't like, has all of these same problems, her record on prisons, trans rights,
sex workers'
rights, her not distancing herself from Biden on Palestine, all completely disqualifying. As I've said online and elsewhere, this is a completely bourgeois thing. The American election is a completely bourgeois affair.
Yeah.
Moving one of these two in and out for one another, on a system or superstructural scale, isn't doing much because they are both candidates. There's not something like in France where we can rally around a figure like Jean-Luc Mélenchon or, a left candidate like that. We don't have that in America at all. And so, like, people just have to, people who are on the left just need to be honest with themselves about what this is. I understand wanting Biden gone. He should not be in there. It is a threat to human safety. I'm not kidding about that because of his age and his decline and having his hand on the nukes. I think Trump would obviously be bad. He would be worse in a lot of ways, even though Dems aren't really doing much for themselves to help it. And, but like, inserting Kamala is nothing like what happened in France or what's happening in Burkina Faso and Niger right now, where they have, I believe, revolutionary governments installed. As my white Western brain understands it, from the little info I get, but like, we don't have that here. So like, we're just looking at two bourgeois parties having a slap fight over how bad it's going to get and which of them gets to do the new enabling acts and make it illegal to be, I don't know, to the left of Reagan or something. So being in America right now is insane. More insane than normal. It feels very like it's teetering, which I mean, in some ways, I mean, it is teetering, but I don't think anything's going to happen right now because there's just too much like other stuff up in the air, and but I mean, we're having a debate about whether the guy who controls our arsenal is well enough to
it's like taking the keys off of Pop because he can't drive no more, but on like a global scale, and it's like, well, the thing is, baffling. You could hurt other people, yeah
I've never wanted I can't think of a single thing I've ever wanted so badly in my life that I would like risk the nuclear annihilation of humanity. Like I just don't. Yeah, I don't think so. But yeah, it's at least funny. I will say that it's very funny to watch these people. Freak out and dance around and try to figure all this, and you're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Someone was saying something about there's this new thing called super agers that are people who just like they get smarter as they age and everything, and it's like,
all right, well, this ain't one of them.
Okay, but what does that got to do with him?
And like, that's somebody else. That's cool. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about William. I'm done complaining about America.
I love it, babes. All right.
3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters, and as always, I'm God fucking damn it all to hell.
Do you know what? As always,
historian. As always, Dr. Eleanor Yannicka, who is not amateurish about history, amateurish about other things perhaps, but certainly not this.
I'm very professional, but about my love and respect for my capable co-host, though.
Thank you.
I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's
Look, we're all trying to function under the collapse of late capitalism. I feel you, baby. We're here. I'm here for you.
Man, I love staring into the abyss occasionally. Damn, this abyss do be staring back, though.
The abyss staring back at me? It's more likely than you think.
That's right. All right. Anyway, today we are talking about the Norman Conquest and the English Anarchy. But before we do, we got questions. First from our patron Evelyn, who says, I'm curious about civil rights in the medieval period, Europe or otherwise. I'm guessing the concept didn't exist like it does today because the concept of legal rights didn't exist back then. Excuse me. But people have always struggled against injustice, both against themselves and others. So what did that look like? Did Jewish communities fight for better rights within their cities? Did priests or monks speak out and act against slavery? Were there attempts to resolve interreligious strife between Christians and Muslims on the Iberian Peninsula? Et cetera, et cetera. What about feudalism? What about feminism? Was there any cultural, political, social movements to say expand what was acceptable for women to do in the Middle Ages?
Okay, so yeah, you're bang on here, Evelyn, in that there's no concept of civil rights because, rights are something that is bestowed upon you. Mm-hmm. In the medieval period, and usually from a royal or imperial context. Occasionally it could also come from the papacy or something like that, and so as a result, rights are something that is given to you by someone who has power over you, right? It's not, there's no idea of a natural right, or that all humans deserve X because of their humanity. Like that's not how things work. So as a result, for example, one of the reasons we see such a lot of anti-Semitism in the medieval period, I mean, there's several many, is because actually Jewish people have really fucking sweet rights. in comparison to a lot of other people, because oftentimes Jewish communities are expressly there because the king has requested that they be so. And Jewish communities are often settled in cities, which are controlled by the crown, usually, as opposed to, lords. And so as a result, so for example, when the Jewish community was invited to England after the Norman Conquest, they were specifically said, look, we're going to give you all these rights. You know, if you come over here, you're going to get these specific things. And some of them were like a very favorable taxation statuses, but also things like if you get in trouble for something, you automatically go to the king's court if you're Jewish. So you don't have to like worry about like what Lord Ralph wants or whatever. Like it's always going to get kicked up all the way to the king, and then the king is going to end up hearing your cases. So unfortunately, though, this is part of what makes people really anti-Semitic, because they're like, why are these Jewish people who killed Jesus getting better things than I am? So, them being seen as favored with particularized rights is one thing that is bad for them. Having said this, there's also just kind of like civic rights are sort of a thing. So, if you're a free man of the city of London, you get specific things. So, you get to be at the courts there. You can drive 2 sheep over London Bridge. You can, things of this nature, right? So, like, being a member of a city does get you certain things, but that's also part of, like, having free man status. In terms of what's going down on the Iberian Peninsula, I mean, there are places and times in which, like, convivencia really does hold sway. So, you see plenty of like Muslim and Christian people hanging out at random times. And you need to only look at the career of El Cid to see about this, right? Where there's rather a lot of backing and forthing. And, a lot of the acrimony that happens on the Iberian Peninsula, sometimes they're like, oh yeah, this is about religion, ? But just as much you see people going back and forth and, fighting or having varying lords, like the reason why El Cid initially gets sent away from like the Castilian throne is because he attacks Granada, which is Muslim, but they were underneath the protection of Castile, and so it was like, you can't attack my vassals, homie, right? So you see, like, it's a lot more complex than that, and indeed an idea of like a constant reconquista is like a particularized fascist piece of propaganda. I don't want to go so far as to say that like convivencia always held sway and that everyone was always getting along and everything was wonderful down on the peninsula. That's not my point, but it's rather over-egged that there was like this existential constant battle. And it's like the Iberian Peninsula isn't necessarily any more violent than anywhere else in Europe at the time, right? You're going to get the same sort of back and forth fighting. Now, in terms of like, monks and priests speaking out against like slavery or the persecution of the Jewish communities, yeah, they do it all the fucking time. And especially like when pogroms and stuff happen against Jewish people, oftentimes priests and bishops step in to try to help Jewish people, as will the crown. Will they be like, get in this castle or like get in this church right now, and we'll try to save you. It doesn't always work.
Yeah.
But there are often attempts in order to stop that. Enslavement, absolutely. There's a big Christian program very specifically against enslavement. And even when you're enslaving people of other religions, oftentimes priests are like, be serious with yourself right now. And like preachers, that's like a big charismatic preacher thing to preach against. And indeed, when the kind of like trade in humans from Africa starts, there are people who are like, get the fuck out of here with this. Now, like in one's own community, like people ride for their homies all the time. Right? Like, we know for a fact that there's plenty of what we would call gay and trans people around, and everyone is like, It's like it's not until the later medieval period, like really the early modern period, that anyone does much of anything about it. It's like the only time you're really gonna get in trouble for it is like if you go to your priest and confess, or like you get caught sucking a dick, like where you shouldn't have been, or something like that. Then you're gonna get in trouble. But like for the most part, everyone is just like, boys will be boys. You know how it is. Kind of a deal. So, and like on a communal level, people are a lot more accepting of it. In terms of like mental illness, this is, we talked about this a bit when we were talking about madness, and like, yeah, people are like down for their homies. They'll be like, oh, well, that's just Chet. He's having a hard time. Right. And there is also, if for example, someone suffers from depression, they definitely see that as like a health issue. Right. It's like, oh no, this person is not choleric, not sanguine, melancholy. They've got the melancholy, right? And so, that this is like a health issue to be looked at. In terms of like women's stuff, well, like women do a lot of things already. So it's like, there isn't that same like, oh, and women need to be kind of like represented in the boardroom thing. Women do be getting very frustrated when they can't be queen or whatever. See the Anarchy for more information. But women are doing rather a lot of stuff, and when we hear from women, they are often like, "Fuck you all, I hate you" with this shit. Where it's like, you see Hildegard writing about this, you see Christine de Pizan writing about this, where they're like, everyone keeps saying women suck and are shit in comparison to men, but I'm not seeing any evidence of this. So what do you want me to do here? But like, obviously, we don't really privilege the voices of women. So it's harder to kind of hear from them. But yeah, they're absolutely out here complaining about it. So it's all a rich tapestry. There's a lot of like thises and that's. It really depends on where you are and who you're talking to. But for the most part, people like their neighbors is kind of the thing. So they don't want them to be hurt unless they are being purposely anti-Semitic. And even then, you see heroes trying to make that not happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think history is filled with, people everywhere who, maybe tried to talk down the crowd and got pushed out of the way or got killed for it, or, and I mean, like, and priests and priests and bishops and people doing all this stuff, and there were Muslim commentators who were like, why are you enslaving Christian, you idiot? Like, the same thing, like, it's not, it's... it's just people, even if they didn't have a language to express what an inalienable human right, what we understand as inalienable human rights, like, worship how you feel, to live free from being oppressed or whatever, they still did that because, even if it's just the most base level, like, what if people come for your stuff? Like, just because they don't like you for so, being an other, being othered, it only takes, just a little bit of time, and then, so you get people doing that. Evelyn, thank you very much for the question. Next one we got from Dog God, who says, what are some things of historical significance that you fear will be lost within our lifetimes? Be they artifacts, writings, archaeological sites, or more abstract concepts like cultural knowledge and perspectives?
Well, we're already losing a lot of things at the moment that piss me off, which is like people turning off their digital archives of things.
Yes. Yeah.
So like the digital dark ages is indeed upon us, and we are going to lose rather a lot of things, and we're living through what that looks like. So which should be a useful object lesson. For people to understand why we use the term Dark Ages. But, like, yeah, we're living through a discarding of lots of media, which we are not going to have anymore, and it stresses me out. It definitely stresses me out as a historian, because it's like, well, what do you do when you can't access these things, type of thing. I do have kind of like an abstract concept that I fear that we are losing, which is people's ability to do research in actual fucking libraries.
Yeah.
And not just libraries, but, generalized repositories of things.
Yeah.
People are so used to just being able to search now. That they, I spend so much time just trying to convince people that a really good thing to do if you're researching something is go to a library, find the book you're looking for, and then look at the other books that are next to it. Because this will help you find more books on the subject. And it's like, there's a physicality of that, which we are losing incredibly rapidly. And it gets to the point too, like in my own research, sometimes like I've had it, when I'm at like the National Library in Prague, where I'm like, can I please see this manuscript? And they go, that's digitized. And I'm like, yeah, but I need to see it.
Okay.
Like I also need to see it. I'm working on this thing. I understand I can look at it online, but like, the scans aren't always perfectly accurate. It's sometimes hard to like see things I need to look at, and just having to make a case for why you need to see things is a difficult thing. So yeah, like this is very like old man yells at cloud of me. But I don't know. I'm one of those people where I retain more information when I read things on paper than on screens, and I fear that a lot of people are like me. And just don't know it because we are losing that.
Yeah, we are losing a lot. I've said on here plenty of times that we burned the Library of Alexandria 100,000 times. We're doing it right now. I mean, there are websites are just taking articles off for no reason. They've had archives that have been there for going back well over a decade. And I mean, like, is this stuff groundbreaking? Probably not. But, like, it doesn't mean we don't need to keep it. I mean, I guarantee you some of it is groundbreaking, either academic research or necessary reporting or stuff like that will be lost to time. But, like, when we talk on the show, when we talk about, like, the evidence we find from history, we have, like, and we're like, well, nobody keeps their, Chinese food menu. They, throw it in the recycling or whatever. But, like, what if we did have that stuff because it did exist and we had a way to preserve it, and people are just, instead of it being like, well, I don't need this Chinese food menu anymore, let's throw it in the recycling, are like, what if we delete every article that people wrote between 2001 and 2015 on this old news website? It's like, that is happening. We have to stop it. The Internet Archive has to be protected and maintained in some way, physically, if necessary. We have to... we have to figure out how we're going to preserve all of these, like, movies and TV shows and things that we have now, because while discs are great, Blu-ray and DVD discs degrade over time, and within anywhere from like 10 to 12 to 15 years can start to lose all that stuff. So you lose that, and you have to, like, hopefully we have digital master copies of it and stuff like that. But, that's something we have to do. And then that goes back to just keeping all these other websites and everything online. Like, because, like, we got a lot of problems with the internet. It sucks for a lot of things. But, like, as a repository of information, it is the biggest one in history. It is beyond the scope of every library ever conceived, like, until 100 years ago or so. Like, it's beyond that, because it has all that, plus it has all of the information supplied by all of these disparate people from around the world with their own perspectives. And, some guy in Sudan says this, and some guy in Mexico writes this, and, like, we have that now. And we're just letting it be atrophied away because of corporate greed and stupidity and everything like that. Yeah, so there's a lot of that's going to be going away. And one thing I just hope doesn't is the actual study of history. A lot of, we got a lot to do, folks. That's the basis of it. We got a lot to do. We got to, preserve the study of history, preserve the things that we have, and preserve the earth somehow. And that probably means that we have to maybe even forcibly shut down every thing doing AI, water draining bullshit. Because I'd rather not kill the Amazon for some dumbass picture. I can... draw. I can Photoshop a woman with two sets of tits on her torso.
Yeah.
And weird hands if I want to. Anyway, excuse me, Dog God and Evelyn, thank you both very much for the questions. If you would like to ask us questions like these, please do subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/WNSDpod. You get access to all of these regular episodes ad-free. We do 2 bonus episodes a month. We've got the third part in our series on Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose coming out this Friday. So it's a lot of fun. Check it out, and you can ask us questions. Patreon.com/WNSDpod. Give us money. It'll be fun. Right. So, as we said, we're going to be starting a new series today, but there has been a slight change of plans. Originally, we were going to be covering the period of English anarchy and the civil conflict that accompanied it, because George R. R. Martin used as the basis for Dance of the Dragons, which is currently portrayed in House of the Dragon on HBO. However, we quickly realized we've also been meaning to do a series on the Norman Conquest, and you can't very well do the Anarchy before the Conquest, now can you? So instead, we're going to do a series on both the Norman Conquest of England in 1066 and the English Anarchy that occurred about 70 years later. Today's episode will focus on bringing everyone up to speed on the history of England prior to the conquest and introduce the Normans. Then we will talk about the conquest next time and go on to the anarchy thereafter. Also, this will be here whenever HBO gets around to doing another Game of Thrones prequel series about Aegon the First Conquest of Westeros. And you can come back and listen to these episodes to find out what inspired George R. R. Martin there too. Although I'm sure we'll just do an episode about it whenever we get there too. So whatever. Call it future-proofing the podcast or something. I don't know. However, that's all in the future, because now I get to do one of my favorite things on the show. Give a brief rundown of several eons of world and human history as a prelude to our main story. How far back will I go? What will I choose to focus on? What events of monumental importance will I gloss over? Well, let's find out as we make our way from the distant past to Roman Britain. Sorry, that sounded weirder than I expected.
Here.
By geological standards, the English Isles are a relatively new phenomenon, having formed out of the breakup of the last supercontinents roughly 60 million years ago. I went back 60 million years. Woo, let's go. Ever since then, the land we now know as England has been connected to and then orphaned from the rest of the European continent dozens of times by the ever-shifting vicissitudes of the relatively shallow waters of the North Sea and global temperature fluctuations. This is all fine until about 800,000 years ago, when the first archaic humans made their way to England across the then-existent land bridge and left traces at Happisburgh in Norfolk. This began nearly 1 million years of discontinuous habitation of the sometimes island of England, with most settlements surviving only briefly before abandonment. Though it should be noted that modern-day Wales contains the furthest north and west Neanderthal remains ever found, dating back more than 200,000 years. Some 60,000 years ago, the first anatomically modern humans arrived on the island, and that was a dark day for humanity indeed. Hunter-gatherers came and went as glaciers waxed and waned until the end of the last glaciation about 12,000 years ago, when the land bridge known as Doggerland appeared in the North Sea, connecting England to Scandinavia. I fucking love Doggerland.
Hell yeah.
I love it. I love that it was eventually mostly subsumed in the largest natural tsunami ever, called the Storega Slide, which is, I guess, a tsunami that wasn't caused by an asteroid, but whatever. Around though it was quite sparse and intermittent, a permanent human presence can be proven on the island beginning about 9,000 BCE. Around 7150 BCE, the famous Cheddar Man died in a cave outside of Somerset. Sometime over the next 3,000 years, Doggerland was finally subsumed under the North Sea, and England became the island we know today. Though by that point a sizable population lived on the island that had already embraced farming and sedentism. The indigenous Britons then built Stonehenge and other megalithic structures, and the island was subject to several major migrations of continental peoples over the years. The locals borrowed heavily from mainland cultural complexes, including the Beaker culture, and after about 1000 BCE, the Hallstatt culture that followed with the invasion of the Germanic Celts. The Celtic mass migration was once believed to have occurred all at once, wiping out the indigenous Brittonic people, but DNA testing and further studies have shown that to be incorrect. Eventually, all of these people would meld together and become known as the Britons, and were considered the indigenous peoples of the island by the time of the Romans. Despite all of this history, England still did not exist in the historical record, as no local writing has ever been found. However, that all changed around 325 BCE, when a Greek adventurer and sailor named Pythias of Massilia voyaged to northwestern Europe and recorded notes about the island in a sailing manual. Over time, more Celts migrated to the island as they were pushed off the mainland by the expansion of Rome. Finally, 55 BCE, Julius Caesar himself turned his eyes to the island, invading twice in the span of 2 years, with both being inconclusive and no permanent Roman presence being established on the island yet. About 100 years later, in 43 CE, the Emperor Claudius successfully incorporated the island into the Roman Empire. There you go, folks. 60 million years of history in less than 4 minutes. And I definitely didn't skip over any important stuff.
No.
So, Eleanor, what should we know about England when it was incorporated into the Roman Empire? Why in the name of God did they incorporate a foggy island full of sheep?
Well, okay, so before the Romans show up, we refer to this as the British Iron Age.
Yes.
And the people in England at the time are largely what we would call Celtic. We're basing this on linguistic usage. Mm-hmm. So Brittonic, the language that most of them speak, seems to be Celtic, and they are hanging out. They have pretty good connections with the continent. There's rather a lot of backing and forthing. We see weapons that are in use on the continent begin to show up here. The way that settlements work, we know rather a lot about hill forts. This is like a big thing that like various tribes do. So they just go find a real big hill, build a fort up top of there. It's pretty sweet. Pretty sweet way of doing it. Pretty large scale agricultural projects going on. And it seems like people are kind of eating sort of well. So one of the reasons why you might want to come up here is steal stuff, right? That's the main reason that any empire does anything, really. Now, it's interesting because part of the reason that they got held back for so long is they used to say that the island of Britannia was haunted. And they're like, you don't want to go up there because of the ghosts or whatever, which is nice. So we know that like guys are kind of hanging out. They got like these thatched roofed houses. They're farming really extensively. And, you know, again, it's the thing where sheep are good. And it's the thing about like trying to get wool is like one of the big things that is kind of like going on really heavily. But also things that kind of get transported down are like wood, for example, because like it's still pretty heavily forested up here, whereas like Rome deforests things pretty quickly. You know, like it is also a good place to kind of like have trading ports on the North Sea more generally. And if you like want amber and things, like it's nice to be able to stop off in Britain and not worry about like getting got, for example. So like we also think that they are perhaps like after metals is like one of the things that they're interested in from here. So yeah, it's one of these things where basically they're just all like, it seems easy enough to kind of get up there, and they seem to have some things that we want, so we're just going to go for it, kind of a deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned some of it, precious metals, wool. What, you know, were they shipping anything else, exporting anything else down to Rome, or did they serve any other purpose for Rome at that point?
I mean, yeah, this is mostly like a smash and grab job, right? They're like, here you go. And it's also like a good place to stick people who you kind of like owe a job to, but they're not very good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're like, send them up to Londinium. It's fine. Like, whatever it is. You know, we know that, I guess that one of the other things up here is cattle. That's the other thing. So like a lot of leather and things. Cattle's a big thing. So it's just kind of like, these are some hick people. But also, like, you know, one of the reasons why they're not particularly interested, for example, in colonizing Germania is because it's got denser soils. Here you have lighter soils and it is already arable. So they're kind of like, this is like you can start farms really easily. They're already doing it. So we don't have to worry about how the heavy plow hasn't been invented. Right?
Yeah. And I mean, we should, of course, mention that the Romans were not unopposed in this.
No.
The Celtic people fought back bitterly under the warrior queen Boudica. And were unfortunately subdued really harshly. Boudica was executed, and the Picts famously were so ornery and so tenacious in fighting that the Romans built a wall, Hadrian's Wall, and manned it with a bunch of forts, and were like, well, thanks for playing. We'll see you later. Hopefully George R. R. Martin can use this in the future to turn it into a fucking 700-foot tall ice wall. So you had that, and so like how did England like fare under Roman rule? Was it, it was okay for a while and then things got bad as the empire got bad?
I mean, like, it really depends on who you ask, right? Because if you ask Boudica, not very fucking well, right?
True.
It's interesting because one of the things that people tend to focus on when they analyze like the withdrawal of Rome or the way that things are, is they will say, well, you surely don't have as much like wine coming up from Gaul anymore. And that's definitely true. You certainly don't see all the Tunisian amphorae and olive oil coming up anymore. Absolutely the case. So like when we are looking at archaeological remains, we see all of these kind of like international goods disappear. So if what you are going to be talking about the success of a society is stuff, the stuff taps do get turned off. Now, what you got to do is ask yourself who gets to have that stuff, right? Because it's like Romans who live inside the cities and whatever. It's like when people are like, Romans have underfloor heating. I'm like, all 5 people who have that. Like there may be like 3 villi.
Don't get me wrong. That's really cool that you could do that back then. But like,
how many slaves do you have manning the fire to keep that going? Right? And it's like, the 3 villi or whatever in England that had them. Yeah, it must have been nice for the guys who live in those 3 houses, right? Like, it's not like this is a widespread thing. And indeed, one of the things that I think that is important to keep in mind is one of the things that we notice from people's skeletons and things like that after the Roman withdrawal is that caloric intake goes up when the Romans fuck off.
Yeah.
So, like, the Romans were here for quite a while, and it meant that people didn't get to eat as much because, they're being taxed to send a bunch of stuff back to Rome for ? Right? So, I mean, what are we calling the mark of a successful society, and what are we calling good, that's something to keep in mind. Like you're not going to get as cool ceramic pots. That is absolutely the case. On the other hand, 3 square meals a day.
Yeah.
So,
you take the good, and the bad, I guess. And I mean, I don't have to tell anyone in England this or anything, but of course, there were tons of cities they established that are still there. Camelot Dunham, which is, I believe, Colchester now. I'm sorry if I pronounced Chester wrong.
That one is Chester,
Yeah, woo! Londinium, obviously,
shout out.
Became nothing, is no longer there. was a twinkle in the eye of someone. And current city of St. Albans,
Verulamium. Yeah,
Verulamium.
Verulamium, that's the one. Yeah.
Hadrian's Wall's still there. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff in Bath. It's still it's named Bath for a reason. Or
Bath.
Excuse me, Bath. As the Roman Empire continued to devolve into near death, at least for the western half, you got reforms in the empire, and then you got a lot of generals, at least 3 or 4, who would raise armies up in England. They would raise these huge armies that people, they defended everyone, and they brought order to England and everything. And then the empire would get thrown into chaos, and the general of this army would be like, what if I just threw my hat in the ring, and they would take everyone out, and society would briefly unravel because there was no Roman presence left, and so everyone was just like, cool, whatever. And the Picts came down, and then they would die, except for Constantine, who famously did not die until much later, and after much cajoling and everything with the Christianity and the Milvian Bridge and all that. You guys, know it. You know it, yeah. And then when the empire split and Western Rome definitely was having trouble like keeping Ravenna intact. They definitely didn't have anything to keep England intact, and the withdrawal began in 401. And while a lot of people did, they got more meals, it did lead to a complete and total societal collapse. When we talk about civilization ending or whatever, their civilization ended. And Paul Cooper, his first episode of the Fall of Civs podcast is about Roman Britain. He talks about how you can tell that things got real lean there because they stopped having iron for nails for shoes, and stuff like that. So precipitated total collapse, but people did get a little bit more food, which is good. And then we get sub-Roman Britain, and you've mostly at this point, the island of England is mostly populated by, some parts of Roman peoples, and then a lot of Celts who are still there. Yeah. But never fear, folks, because we just have so many Germanic peoples who are ready to come over here and just invade again and again and again and again. And, first we get the Angles. We know the Angles, not really, but you know. Eleanor, who are the Angles? Well,
that's where we get the name, isn't it? Yeah. So that's cool. Like the Angles are kind of like, so they're one of the first Germanic people to show up, and this isn't to say that there hadn't already been back and forth, because they. There's been a lot of people going back, but they're a very specific people or tribe. We think they kind of come from like southern Denmark, very specifically. And we first kind of find out about them from Tacitus, which, and, fun. Like Tacitus is like one of the ones who's kind of like, we're going to write all this down. He writes it in this history called Germania. So we know that they are kind of like a coming on over, it's the first of the Danes, essentially. Yeah.
And then the Saxons are, I believe they're from, it's northeast Germany, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're up there. The Jutes also come over.
And they're northern Danish.
Northern Danish. All of these start coming over in the early 400s. And then a little bit later, the Frisians do, and that's like the Low Countries, parts of France. And so you get this nice mix, this nice meld, because they, a long time ago, there used to be this idea that when, mostly they called the Anglo-Saxons, but when the Anglo-Saxons, Jutes, and Frisians invaded, they like wiped out all the Celtic indigenous British people, and DNA testing has since proven that to be completely inaccurate. I mean, there is obviously a little bit more the ancestry of these Germanic and Danish peoples than the British, than the indigenous Celts and Brittonic peoples, but because they did invade and they did do a lot of displacement, but they didn't wipe these people out. They more, in some places they fought and they did kill some of the locals, but in other places they just showed up and they were like, look, this is the new power structure. And the people were like, all right, I guess, man.
Fine.
If you protect me, cool.
Which is the classic way. It's also like what was going down with Rome a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Where,
Rome didn't show up in like, for the most part, didn't show up and like just completely genocide an entire country. And they were like, now, they put their people in charge and they'd work on top of the local structure. And, it's kind of what they did. And there's, as Eleanor, we mentioned on the last episode, we talked about the term Anglo-Saxon. There is no Anglo-Saxon rule, and just trying to whittle all of this down and just call them Anglo-Saxons does, a disservice because
it's much more complex than that, which is actually true of everything in kind of like the late antique and early medieval period in England, where it's just like it's a mess down here.
Yeah. Yeah, and then then we get. Let me know if you've heard this before, but England at this time is divided into 7 kingdoms. Anyway, 7 kingdoms. Of course, if you don't think about the Picts and all those guys up there, or what is it, the east side of the island, which nobody bothered at that point. They were like, let the Britons over there.
I don't want to deal with that. I'm not going down there.
What is that, Wales? I'm not going to Wales yet. We'll do Wales later. And we got 7 kingdoms. Eleanor, can you tell us a little bit about the Heptarchy?
Yeah, the Heptarchy is cool. Is like a quick refresher on that fact, so the Heptarchy, so you got the 7 kingdoms, right? So they are Northumbria, which is kind of like northwest, and Northumbria is huge, is the thing. So it's kind of like basically from Hadrian's Wall down to kind of like like past like York and things like that, like which doesn't exist yet. Over in the east you have like kind of like from there you kind of got like Strathclyde and stuff, so like that's what's happening. Then below that you have the kingdom of Mercia. Now Mercia is absolutely enormo. And Mercia is kind of like, I suppose, what we would now call the Midlands ish. And like it kind of gets down though into like around about London and things like that. Now you also have the East Angles, so which is over in what is still called like East Anglia. So like that's the sort of like butt part of England that sticks out in the west. That's where you get your Norwich and your Ipswich and things like that, and that's where we find a lot of like cool finds. Now this is really cool. My brain is forgetting, the big ships that they found over there. Well, whatever, dude. Sutton Hoo, that's the one. Fuck off.
Oh yeah. That had all the armor.
Yeah. It's cool. We like that. So yeah. And then you've got the East Saxons, so that's your London. Like basically the mouth of the Thames. So that's nice for them. Then you got Kent. It's in Kent. So that's like southeast of us. And then you have Wessex. So Wessex is like what is now like I suppose you would call it Devon, over to like east and west Sussex. So that's like where Brighton is and things like that. And then you got Wales, obviously. But we also kind of like count Cornwall in there, which is kind of like, West Wales is sort of what that means. So yeah. So that is what you get under the Heptarchy. And these are all speaking, early English. They are connected to greater or lesser extents to the continent. They intermarry with each other. Every woman is called Aethelgifa or Aethelgifu by law. So it's very difficult to tell them all apart.
If you have trouble pronouncing the AE thing that George R. R. Martin loves to do in his names, then buddy, do not look at the Heptarchy. You're going to get so many Ethelreds and Aethelstans and Aethgifus that you're not even going to, your head's going to spin.
And like one of the things that's kind of happening on here too is like the Christianization. Now, having said that, there are certain people who had been kind of like Roman, who'd been left behind, who were still Christian, but it's like, because they were sort of patrician individuals, everyone was like, that's cute. Oh, look, they think they're still cities.
Oh,
like, or whatever. So, like, largely we haven't, like, Christianized yet. But then you begin then the process of Christianization under the Heptarchy. We don't know tons about this. Like, all of our sources are like, there's coins.
Yeah.
Somebody,
they started putting crucifixes on them around this time, and you're like, well, that seems like a good a time as any to say they were Christians, I guess.
Exactly. And then I
mean, sometimes, and I'm not joking, like sometimes that is what history and archaeology is you're like, they didn't have the crucifix on there before. It's a pretty common symbol.
I don't know, brah. I don't know. It's that. I mean, this is the thing, right? So we don't have a lot of sources for now. It is, the Dark Ages. What you want me to do about it, right? Yep. So most of our sources are archaeological. Our sources then start happening with your homie and mine, the Venerable Bede.
Woo! If you want someone who is excited about Christianity, you got it. If you want someone who is as in the tank for England as possible, he's the guy. And was he biased against or for Northumbria? I can't ever remember. He's really biased one way or the other.
He's pretty pro. He's pretty pro Northumbria.
That's, okay,
so
that's what I thought.
He's buried in Durham, and he was born up around by what is now Sunderland. So he's like a Northumbrian guy. And like this is his fucking deal. Right.
Yeah.
So
you got a stark loyalist writing the histories here, and maybe it's not so bad.
fine.
Bede, I very vaguely remember having to read like some a few things from him in like an English class, high school English class or something, because they were like, this is an example of Old English, extremely whatever, and I was just like, wow. Yeah, this is...
What the fuck am I looking at? Yeah.
What is this shit? But Bede, I think we're joking a little, but also this is one of the only sources other than, until you get the Domesday Book, and that's not for another 500
years. It's 7th century, right? So it's really useful stuff. And even if a lot of it is like mythologizing, specifically bigging up Northumbria, things like this, but all of the sources that we have do this. It allows us, and when I say I'm kind of like it's called the Ecclesiastical History of the English People. Is like the big one. So he's like kind of the first person who bothered writing about English history, and so that's cool. And he's got some cute little metaphors in there. Like I was at, so he's got this metaphor for how your life is like the flight of a sparrow through a hall, right? So it's like you see it while it's in the hall, but what happens before and after is unknowable. And that's a really lovely kind of way of thinking about it. And I think about it often, and I'm like, that's a good one, Bede. You got my ass.
A weird Prussian guy might say something about the Owl of Minerva, something at midnight, but whatever. Get his ass, Bede.
Get him.
That's awesome.
Yes,
I love that. Yeah, he was a very talented writer, from what I understand. Very biased towards church accounts, and Northumbrians, and biased, very, very biased against those damn heathen Danes who won't just leave us alone. Because beginning in 787, we get a familiar sight, and that is Viking invasions in England. They start then famously invaded and destroyed Lindisfarne in 793, and they this is going to be a problem until until it's going to be a problem for like 200, 300 years, because the Vikings come and they take over. They
sure do
establish themselves as rulers.
Well, and this is the thing. So Viking attacks have been a problem the entire fucking time, right? And then meanwhile, also, we lose the Heptarchy, and you have then like 4 kingdoms that are consolidated by like about 829. So you just have Northumbria some more, Mercia some more, both of the huge kingdoms. Then you just have East Anglia and Wessex. Like, R.I.P. to Kent. It's been real. But consider yourself amalgamated. Yeah. Right? Kind of a deal. And you have all of these Viking invasions, and everyone is like, fuck, shit, fuck, which is what everyone is saying at the time, right? But then you get a unification of England so that it stops being the various things. And this happens under Athelstan in 929, which is shockingly late.
Yeah. I always find that weird because I always thought like England got united at like 600 or something like that. And it's like, nope, it didn't even happen until after Alfred the Great lived. Like, no.
It's wild, right? Because it's like we have this tendency to talk about England like some kind of a done deal. But the fact that like Charlemagne has done, been, and gone, homie, right? And we're just getting to a concept of Englishness is quite funny. So like this is like right an interesting kind of period, and so like you've got Athelstan who kind of comes to the throne. This is good, and now we're cooking, right? We're now cooking, but this is kind of like a Germanic speaking bunch of people. They're kind of doing their thing over here, right? Over in the West, like Wales owns more than what we would call Wales. Like, Strathclyde owns more than what you would consider to be like kind of Scottish. Like Cumbria and all that is kind of like definitely hanging out there. But, but you're getting more of an English vibe, right?
It kind of starts to look like England, even though part of it at this time, or at least before this point, was, the Danelaw. That's where the Danes
I love the Danelaw,
lived and had their law. And and it's just like, man, I love that it was just the Danish were just like,
oh, I'm going over
fierce marauders, and it's like now it's like, I can barely find Denmark. No, I know where Denmark is. It's the little nub on top of Germany, but like, it's like these were the fiercest people alive at this point, and I mean, even Alfred the Great spent a few years paying them off not to fight him instead of fighting them. Eventually he did, and won a lot of autonomy for what they considered.
But that's how you dealt with Vikings. Like, it was pretty standard. It was just sort of like, I don't know, man, shut up. Like, take this money. I can't be dealing with you right now, right?
Yeah, leave me alone. And then they broke the thing, and by that time he had brokered peace in like parts of the land, and it was like, well, finally, let's go fuck these guys up. And they did for a little while, except for we get Alfred's son Edward, and then he had another son, and then there was Athelstan.
Yeah.
And the Danes, and these guys ruled fine, and the Danes weren't a problem until we get a guy named Aethelred the Unready.
God bless him.
Boy, if they're calling you the Unready, it ain't great for you. And the Danes came back, and
and did they ever? Come on, Sven Forkbeard.
They fucking annihilated England. Harold Bluetooth, the creator of Bluetooth listening technology.
That's right.
And he landed over here, Danish, as Eleanor said. Also, his son Sweyn was like, "Yep," and they took over.
Yeah, they did. They sure did. And it's cute. Like, I'm a big fan of Sven Forkbeard. A shout out to a legend. Yes, King, take over. That's quite funny to me. Like, was it only 5 years and was he barely here? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think it's also really funny if you like look it up on Wikipedia. It'll be like his predecessor was Ethelred the Unready, and his successor was Ethelred the Unready. Where everyone's just like, just forget about that. Just
yeah, and then and they were like, yeah, man, Ethelred, yeah, come on back, and we'll get your son Edmund, and he died. And then they're like, oh, it's time for us to bring in the best named one, the best named English king. You know him, you love him, Cnut. No, I'm just kidding. It's Canute. Everybody loves Canute, Sven's son, and Canute is definitely like Danish. Mm-hmm. They get incorporated into an empire. Part of England, a major part of England was incorporated into a Danish North Sea Empire as late until Canute died in the 1040s.
Like, they were just like, nope. Absolutely not. Canute was just like, yeah, I'm having the north bit. Get fucked. Yeah. And Edmund Ironside is like, oh, okay.
What if I die? Okay. And he dies in 1042. Canute, ripped to a legend. He dies, and it passes on to his son, Canute II.
Harthacnut.
Who also dies. No, I thought there was...
No, you're right. You're right. I'm getting too excited about Harthacnut.
No, because there's Harthacnut.
Because Harthacnut is the third one. Yeah.
Yeah, Canute the second dies young, and it's like, well, that's sad, but don't worry, we've got a spare. Harthacnut, you're up, and he's king for like a year-ish, and he knows he's going to die, and eventually summons a guy, his half-brother. His name's Edward, and just before Harthacnut died, he named his half-brother Edward the king, the heir, and Harthacnut dies in 1042. And Edward is this guy, and he's half Dane. Mm-hmm. He's half Norman.
Yeah.
Through the descent of his mother, Emma of Normandy, and Edward would rule for 22 years, take the name Edward the Confessor, and then he died childless in 1066. Mm-hmm. Emma of Normandy was the sister of Richard II of Normandy, who was the grandfather of a guy named William, who would soon take the sobriquet, the Conqueror. Eleanor, we've talked a lot about the English, and we've gotten all the way up to 1066. And don't worry, we'll talk more about the succession crisis of Edward the Confessor next time. For those of you who are really into this, don't worry. But before we go, we got to meet the Normans.
Yes.
Eleanor, who are the Normans? When did they become a thing? Like, when does Normandy become a thing?
Not for quite some time, right? Because so what we now call Normandy as an area, it was always really sweet. Like, this is a thing that people really, really love, because it has just got like really excellent farmland. It's in a really great position. It is easy to get up and down because of all the rivers. It's on the North Sea. So the Romans have lots of villas there. Mm-hmm. And then eventually when they leave, you have the Germanic tribes come in and settle, and it gets amalgamated into Frankish rule. Right? Mm-hmm. Then the Merovingians take over. And it's a really important area for them because they like to chill there. They think it's really great. Right? So because they like to chill there, they often have their summer palaces there and things like that. They also establish a bunch of monasteries, which is rather the thing to do in the early medieval period. Because if you're going to be the king, like, it's obviously unethical as everybody knows. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to establish a bunch of monasteries in order to pray for your soul, right? Mm-hmm. Trouble with building monasteries in a place that has really great river connections and is on the sea is it's like, do you want Vikings? Because this is how you get Vikings.
Because they're coming. Did you not learn from Lindisfarne? And they're like, what the fuck is a Lindisfarne?
I don't know what that is.
No, I don't know. And they're like, well, you should.
Yeah, right? And like...
Because here they come.
But they're out here making like Mont Saint-Michel. They're out here making Ivro, places like this, right? Mm-hmm. So much in the way that England has a problem with Danes, so does Normandy. And the raids start happening somewhere around 790 to 800. And now this is where you get the name of Normandy eventually, because they call the Vikings Northmen, which is Nordmani in Frankish at the time. And the Vikings are showing up because they're like, I love to attack monasteries. That's what's fun for me. I simply love to pillage monasteries, right? And so like they're going to like Jumier, they're going to like they're just ripping it up, right? Mm-hmm. And it's nice to pillage monasteries specifically because you know there's a bunch of nice stuff in there, and also the monks can't fight back because they're fucking monks, right?
Yeah.
And like at the time, the king of the Franks is Louis the Pious, who you'll remember as one of Charlemagne's fail sons. And like he's like slap fighting with his brothers the entire time, and he's in Aachen. And so he never manages to be like, all right, look, we've got a Viking problem. I'm going to take control of this. And he just like completely loses control of a lot of the coastal areas of France, right? And the Vikings are like, noted, the Carolingians can't do shit because they've got so much land that they can't even like come and do anything about this, right? So like this is cute. Like essentially you just have like a Viking season every year, which is really, really normal. The Vikings show up in the summer, they rack everything, you know, they take all their stuff and they go back on their boats and they go, right? But one of the things that they're kind of doing really hardcore is that they're going further and further down the Seine as they do this, right? And so by 851, they're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm staying here. Why should I go back to Scandinavia where it's much colder? Like, I'm just going to stay here and we're going to, like, terrorize the Parisians all winter long, right? So now the Carolingians are like, well, what the fuck do we do? Because it's not very God loves you all when you've got a bunch of pagans camped out in your backyard, right? So, and also there's, like, a lot of internecine fighting in what is now France. Anyway, so, like, Charles the Bald, who by now is king, is also fighting with Brittany, which is next door to what will become Normandy, right? And it's not in the Kingdom of France. And he's like, okay, look, Bretons, will you come help me fight the Vikings? And they're like, yeah, I mean, I guess kind of. But then sometimes there is a man, and his name is Rollo.
Woo! A man named after a dog and a candy.
Yeah, I love Rollos.
Chocolate stuff with caramel.
Yeah, they're good, man.
They are delicious. Yeah. And then sometimes they're just like one of the most important people ever, and literally no one knows who this guy is.
Okay, and we don't. We've got no fucking clue. He's Scandinavian. We know that. Yeah. We think that probably he was called Hrolfr, which is not as easy as Rollo, but you know we've eased it up a little bit.
I can see why the Hollywood ad execs made you change that to Rollo. That rolls off the tongue better. Yeah.
So like later histories of him, one of which is notably written by Dudo of St. Quentin, says that okay, they're Danes. He's like from a noble Danish and he ended up having to like flee Denmark because his brother Gorum got in a fight. And got killed by his enemy, and Rollo had to leave. By the time it gets to the 11th and 12th century, people are saying that, like, you know, he's a bold Norwegian who struck out from the Christian coast, right? And by the 12th century, William of Malmesbury is going, oh, he was a noble Norwegian. And then by the 13th century, Snorri Sturluson in the Icelandic sagas is saying that Rollo's name was Hrolf the Walker because he was so huge that horses couldn't carry him.
Hell yeah, let's go.
So
look, Snorri did the best. The rest of you, thanks for playing.
Thanks for playing. Job, we love Snorri. Like, shout out. So, like, the point is we don't fucking know, but, like, he's really, really important, so everyone is mythologizing him, and they want to build a kind of specific noble lineage for him in order to explain the power that he gets. One way or another, we think that he sails up to Rouen by 876, and he takes it entirely rather than just, like, stealing from it. They almost level Rouen. Okay. Wow. And the Bretons who are supposed to, like, be fighting him are like, dude, we are leaving. Right. And they, like, basically are like, I'm not just fucking off out of Rouen. I'm fucking out of the Breton March. Like, you can have it. Yep. No, thank you. So then he also takes control of Bayeux because he marries this chick, we think, maybe, this also might be a legend, named Papa, who was the daughter of the Count of Rouen, Berenger. And they have a son called William Longsword. And one way or another, we know that, like, Rollo has this son, William Longsword. Is he Papa's daughter? We don't fucking know. But, like, one of the things that the Northmen are really good at doing is intermarrying with local nobles, right? To be like, and they're like, this is how you take over shit, right? And so basically what is kind of happening within all of this is that, like, there's still a lot of attacking down the Seine. Rollo is like, not only do I live here now, but, like, but I'm taking my boat and I'm going down the Seine, right? And so, like, he takes shot on, like he sacks it on, like, in 9/11, which is like, whoa, boy, because, like, that's a really important place, like, in terms of, like, the way that French people think about themselves, because that's where you've got to go get, like, you know, like it's very connected to, like, ideas of, like, a French royalty. And, like, basically the king is like, bruh, I don't know what to do about this. Like, these Vikings are marauding. And he's like, listen, Charles the Simple is his name. And he's like, look, I am going to, like, a counterattack. He eventually manages to get Rollo, like, stopped. Okay. And they decide that instead of going on like this, because he's not going to always be able to pull off, like, it's a literally miraculous victory. They think the Virgin Mary appeared, which was nice of her. They sign the Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Epte. And basically what it was is that Charles gives Rollo all the land around the mouth of the Seine and Rouen to Rollo. And he's like, but in exchange, you need to fucking convert to Christianity.
Yeah.
A. And B, you need to swear fealty to me as, like, the king of West Francia. And also, like, you need to, like, marry my daughter. So Rollo's like, okay, cool. Like, I will do that. Like, there's a couple legends of him being like, I'll never bow to a king, but, like, probably not, or whatever. So he converts, and he gets all his homies to convert. They all go to Rouen Cathedral. They all convert to Christianity. And bada bing, bada boom. That is how you get Normandy, because that's where the Northmen live.
Nice.
Right?
Nice. Yeah. And, so Rollo is incredibly important. He, like, forces his way into this scenario, and but his kids end up holding up a lot of their end of the bargain. You know, William of Longsword wasn't fucking around. No. He kept things going, and you know, it's just you get this, like, I guess, Norman identity that shows up with these, like, superior warrior kings, as opposed to, like, everyone else around them who may be warriors, but they aren't these kind of, you know, they aren't descended from Viking warriors. They're descended from Charlemagne warriors. And while Charlemagne may have been great, the rest of you are morons and dupes.
And it's like, they're neither Vikings nor Frenchmen, but a secret third thing, right? which is it's really what's interesting about them is they're absolutely great at fighting, but they're also really good at bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Which is like funny. They're like, all right, bitches, we're all about to learn French. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to learn French. We're going to learn Latin. We're going to take all this over. And they will kill each other and they'll kill you and they will do all these and they will duly file the paperwork necessary after this. So it's like William Longsword, one of the things that he does, like he goes to like, King Rudolph does like almost like immediately after his dad dies. And he gets way more land, like most of Brittany. Right? Like he's got the Channel Islands. The Britons are like, I didn't feel like I was consulted about this at all. And he's like, get the fuck out. Right? Like he's like razing castles to the ground. Like there's lots and lots of like stuff back and forth. But then unfortunately, William does get killed in an ambush by the Bretons in 942. And at this point in time, his son Richard the First succeeds him.
And they were like, and Louis and Otto the First of the Holy Roman Empire were like, look, we got this. It's over. And, then they got their asses beat by teenagers.
Yeah, like, it's so funny because, like, Louis is like, okay, I'm immediately kidnapping this child.
Yeah.
And so he's like, all right, but I'm not going to deal with it. Count of Ponthieu, like, you take this kid. And Louis is like, yeah, because he needs to learn courtliness. And the Normans are like, get fucked. Absolutely not. And they like revolt. They like storm the king's palace. And then they're like, okay, no, here's that kid. No, here you go. And they like have to give him back. Like that is how fucking like violent these people were. So like, it's also quite interesting because we're only 3 generations in at this point in time. And Normans are like, give us back our fucking duke. Right?
They're like, no, we like this guy, not you. Give us the kid back now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, there's all these like interesting bits there too, because the fact that Louis is like, oh yeah, no, we're teaching him courtliness, right? They're like, because he isn't courtly because he's a fucking Norman, right? He's not Gallic. He's a Norman, right? So then by the time he turns 14, Richard is like, it's on, immediately attacks Louis.
Yep.
And like, Harold of Denmark is like, I love this.
This is great.
So they're like, basically they take all of these hostages and the king is like, okay, fine, you're the Duke of Normandy, fuck off, get out of here, right? And then basically he marries like one of the daughters of Hugh the Count of Paris, so that's like something. And then he's like, hey, Otto, like to the Holy Roman Emperor, and is like, wouldn't it be fun? Like, like Louis is like, we'll just attack, like Rouen. It'll be cool. And Otto's like, yeah, sure. Why not? Cheeky bit of like attacking. Nope. Absolutely owned, got sent on their way. Right. Like, basically people keep trying it and it does not happen. Right. So he is also a really good ruler. He focuses on kind of like consolidating power. He gets back all of his father's lands. And he also does smart things, like he makes his second son the Archbishop of Rouen, right? He has 8 fucking kids who he intermarries with all the local nobles, right? So that there are people who are going to want to back him up. So he dies at 64 in 996, and like by this time it's like, these are Normans. There is a dynastic family. This is good, right?
Yeah. They've been assimilated into French culture. They've brought in parts of Viking culture. We're syncretizing everything. We're coming up with a new, as you said, secret third thing. And it was Normanness. Obviously, it would get subsumed back into French later. But, for a few hundred years,
they were doing it.
They were the real ones.
Yeah. So at this, I mean, it's all a mess. Like at this point in time, you get Richard II, the Good, takes over. He immediately starts beefing with England, which is really, really funny. I think that this is good. He's like letting Vikings camp out at Normandy to attack
Yeah.
And his dad had been like, no, there's no, there's not going to be any Vikings over here, Ethelred. And Ethelred is like, why is your son letting Vikings there? And he's like, dude, I'm dead. I don't know what to tell you. Right. So like, and so at that point, he's like, okay, look, I've been antagonizing the English crown. I will marry my sister Emma of Normandy to Ethelred the Unready. And then that's going to solve this, right? So she then has two sons, Alfred and Edward the Confessor, right?
Yep.
And then that is how you get, and if you want the conquest of England, this is how it happened. So if you're wondering how a Norman girl got married onto the English throne in the first place, it's because her brother was specifically antagonizing the English by letting Vikings camp out.
And then
I think that's funny.
And then it is funny. And then and then the Danes attacked England, and they were like, this Canute guy, he seems all right. You can marry my sister, and voila. Then you got. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Canute. No, he married Emma. And
because Emma, it was. They're like basically when you take over the English throne, you also get to marry Emma.
Right.
Like that's like part of the deal.
Like, look at this prize. You get Richard has a child outside of the bonds of marriage. Has a bastard child who he names William. And William takes over he takes power in 1046, and they try to pull the same shit with William that they pulled with his forebears, and
it don't work.
Dog, it went about as well as you might expect when you are still not as strong as this warrior class of people who have stationed themselves on the coast. Maybe learn it, and they were like, no, they didn't care. Nobody cared that he was nobody in France cared that he was a bastard anyway.
And it was like really common for the Normans. Like they still had what they called Danish marriage customs. So they were constantly like marrying a French girl, but then like their real wife was like some Viking chick that they banged, and that's where all of the kids were. So like people would make a lot about the fact that William was a bastard now, but everyone then was like, whatever, dude.
Yeah, he he defends all his stuff. He keeps he has these relationships that he maintains with Edward the Confessor, while he's king, and Edward has his own succession crisis that we'll talk about next time. But the long and the short of it is, by 1066, William has been the ruler of Normandy for 20 years. He's fully consolidated all his power. He's got like a full army at his back. He is, ready to go should the worst happen to his cousin Edward. And lo and behold, something happened to his cousin Edward, and that leaves England as we know it with a shaky,
wide open,
foundation. It's wide open. They crown Harold Godwinson in early 1066 after Edward passes, but a lot of people don't seem to care for that, including one of Harold's brothers named Tostig, another guy who you might have heard of, King Harald Hardrada of Norway.
Love him.
And, of course, old Billy the Bastard. He's going to go over there and he's going to fuck shit up. And that's what we'll talk about next time because, we'll get to the conquest and we'll get to see... we'll get to see these people. We'll get to see what happens when you show up you show up on September 25th, and 3 months later you've won the crown for the entire kingdom. That's what we call efficiency, folks. That's how you want your conquest to work. Efficient. You fight one battle, and then that's that.
That's it.
But we'll talk about it next time. Because Eleanor, did you have anything else from the Normans before we move on?
No, I've been yelling at y'all, enough already. We need to get into it next week, but I just think they're neat. I'm like Marge Simpson with the potato on this one. I'm like, I like them. I like Normandy generally. I think it's a good place. Yeah. Yes.
I just like that the Vikings, the Danes, and the Norse and all them were just, seeding people up the coast. They were like, they knew, they had the foresight to know in 1,000 years we're going to be the laughing stock of everything. But now, ha ha! Woo! Yeah, anyway, we'll get to it next time. Thank you all so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Do subscribe to the Patreon if you want to help us out. Otherwise, Eleanor, what's going on with you?
It's your girl. I'm on the socials. I've had to sign off a little bit because I got too annoyed with politics last week. And I will say, for our leftist friends, I do have a good cameo on a podcast about the history of capitalism, which we can stick in the show notes, where I'm kind of talking about the medieval origins thereof. But the guys who run it are comrades and incredibly cool. So if you want to hear my nonsense, I encourage you to check that out.
Cool.
Otherwise, you know where the blog is, going-medieval.com. You know all about my excellent fucking book, The Once and Future Sex. But yeah, check out my nonsense for sure.
Cool. Yeah, well, and my stuff, Luke is amazing on the socials. You can find my old show, People's History of the Old Republic, wherever you are listening to this. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye!